Cole had never thought of himself as anyone special. He was 22 years old, a graduate student at Columbia University in New York City, and his life was as ordinary as anyone could imagine. He woke up every morning in his small apartment, ate cheap instant noodles for breakfast, drank too much coffee, and spent most of his time buried under research papers and textbooks. His car was 15 years old and made strange noises whenever he drove it. His bank account had just enough money to pay rent and buy groceries. His biggest worry in life was whether he would finish his astrophysics thesis before his professor lost patience with him. Had no girlfriend, no exciting hobbies, and no grand plans for the future. He figured he would graduate, maybe get a job at some research facility, and live a quiet life studying the stars from a distance. That was the extent of his ambition. He was comfortable being invisible, being just another face in the crowd, being nobody important. That all changed on a Tuesday afternoon in the middle of October. Was walking across the university campus, his backpack heavy with books, his mind focused on the equations he needed to solve for his thesis. The sky above was gray and cloudy, threatening rain, and he was thinking about whether he should stop for coffee before heading to the library. It was the most mundane moment of the most mundane day. Then the sky split open. There was no warning. One moment the clouds were dark and heavy with rain. The next moment they were torn apart by something massive descending from above. Stopped walking and looked up, his mouth falling open in shock. A ship was coming down through the atmosphere, a vessel so enormous that it blocked out the entire sky above Central Park. It was the size of a football stadium, maybe bigger, and its hull was made of metal that seemed to shift between silver and gold as it caught the light. The ship made no sound. It simply floated there, hovering above the city like something out of a dream or a nightmare. All around, people were screaming and running in every direction. Cars crashed into each other on the streets. Alarms blared from every building. The world was falling into chaos. But did not run. He stood there on the campus pathway, staring up at the impossible thing in the sky, and he felt something strange stirring in his chest. It was not fear. It was not excitement. It was something deeper, something he could not name, like a memory trying to surface from the depths of his mind. The ship looked familiar somehow, though he knew he had never seen anything like it in his life. A beam of light shot down from the vessel and struck the ground directly in front of him, raised his arm to shield his eyes from the blinding brightness. When he lowered it, the light had formed a perfect circle around his feet. He should have stepped out of it. He should have run like everyone else. But his legs would not move. His body felt frozen, locked in place by some invisible force. The light pulled him upward. Felt his feet leave the ground. The world below grew smaller and smaller as he rose toward the ship. Wind rushed past his face, and the screams of panicked people faded into silence. He passed through a circular opening in the hull and found himself standing inside a chamber that was larger than his entire apartment building. His heart was pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. His hands were shaking. He expected to see weapons pointed at his face, alien creatures ready to experiment on him or kill him, or do whatever aliens did to humans in the movies. What he saw instead made no sense at all. There were aliens in the chamber, dozens of them, arranged in neat rows on either side of a central pathway. They were humanoid in shape but taller than any human, maybe 7 or 8 feet in height. Their skin shimmered like pearl, smooth and iridescent, and their eyes were deep and strange, filled with swirling colors that reminded of photographs of distant nebulae. Every single one of them was on their knees. Their heads were bowed low, almost touching the floor, and their arms were crossed over their chests in what looked like a gesture of deep respect or worship. They were not moving, not speaking, barely even breathing. The silence in the chamber was absolute. Stood there, frozen in confusion, his backpack still hanging from his shoulders, his coffee-stained hoodie completely out of place in this magnificent alien setting. A figure at the end of the pathway lifted her head. She was different from the others, taller and more imposing, dressed in armor that gleamed with golden light. Her face was beautiful in a way that was not quite human, with high cheekbones and eyes that seemed to hold the depth of entire galaxies. Tears were streaming down her face. She rose to her feet slowly, gracefully, and walked toward with measured steps. Each footfall echoed through the silent chamber. When she reached him, she stopped and looked at him for a long moment, her eyes searching his face as if she was looking for something specific. Then she spoke. "The bloodline returns." Her voice was soft but clear, resonating through the chamber like music. "After 3 generations, the heir has come home." Stared at her, his mind struggling to process what was happening. He wanted to speak, to ask questions, to demand explanations, but his voice would not work. All he could do was stand there and listen as the alien female dropped to one knee before him, her armored fist pressed against her heart. "I am High Commander Seraphine of the fleet," she said, "and I have spent 30 years searching for you, my lord. Your great-grandfather was the greatest conqueror our galaxy has ever known. His blood flows through your veins. His legacy is your birthright." She lifted her head and met his eyes. "You are not just a student, Cole. You are the heir to an empire that spans 2,000 star systems, and whether you believe it or not, you are the only hope we have left." Behind her, the dozens of kneeling aliens lifted their voices in unison, speaking words in a language did not understand, but somehow felt deep in his bones. He looked down at his trembling hands, at the coffee stain on his sleeve, at the worn straps of his backpack. Just this morning, he had been worried about his thesis. Now he was standing in an alien ship, being told he was the heir to a galactic empire. Cole, the unremarkable boy from Ohio who had never done anything important in his entire life, had just discovered that his blood carried the legacy of a conqueror. And nothing would ever be the same again. Sat in a chair that seemed to be made of solid light, his hands gripping the armrests so tightly that his knuckles had turned white. The room around him was elegant and strange, with walls that shifted colors slowly like a living sunset and furniture that floated slightly above the floor. Through a massive window, he could see the earth getting smaller and smaller as the ship carried him away from everything he had ever known. High Commander Seraphine sat across from him, her armor now replaced with flowing robes that sparkled with tiny points of light like captured stars. She had been patient with his silence, giving him time to process the impossible things she had told him, but now she leaned forward with urgency in her eyes. "I know this is overwhelming," she said gently, "but there is much you need to understand, and we do not have the luxury of time." Finally found his voice. It came out rough and dry. "Tell me everything." Seraphine nodded and began to speak. She told him about his great-grandfather, a man born on a distant world in a galaxy torn apart by endless wars. For thousands of years, different civilizations had fought each other for territory, resources, and power. Billions had died. Entire planets had been reduced to ash. The galaxy was a place of suffering and chaos, with no end in sight. Had changed everything. He had started as a simple soldier, fighting in battles that seemed hopeless, but he was different from other warriors. He was stronger, faster, smarter. He could see patterns in warfare that others could not see. He won battles that should have been impossible to win. His reputation grew, and soldiers from other worlds began to seek him out, wanting to fight under his command. Within 20 years, had built an army unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. He conquered world after world, but not through cruelty or destruction. He conquered through strategy, through diplomacy when possible and overwhelming force when necessary. He gave defeated enemies a choice: join his empire and live in peace, or resist and be destroyed. Most chose peace. By the time he was 50 years old, had united over 2,000 star systems under a single banner. He had ended wars that had raged for. He had crushed tyrants and freed slaves. He had built roads between the stars, connecting civilizations that had never known each other existed. The galaxy, for the first time in recorded history, knew peace. Your great-grandfather was not just a conqueror, Seraphine said, her voice filled with reverence. He was a builder. He created a civilization where different species could live together, trade together, grow together. He was feared by his enemies but loved by those who lived under his protection. Trillions of beings owed their freedom to him. Listened in silence, trying to connect this legendary figure to the quiet man he had seen in old family photographs. The great-grandfather who had died before was born. But power is a heavy burden, Seraphine continued. After decades of war and rule grew tired, his enemies were defeated, peace had been achieved. There was nothing left to conquer, nothing left to build. He had given everything to the galaxy, and he wanted something for himself. She paused, and her expression grew sad. He wanted to disappear. Had done the unthinkable. One night, without warning, he had left his throne, taken a small personal ship, and vanished into the unexplored regions of space. He left behind no instructions, no heirs, no explanation. The empire he had built was suddenly without its creator. The council, made up of the rulers of the most powerful systems, had taken over governance. They had maintained peace through diplomacy and the memory of power. But decades passed, and the memory began to fade. New generations grew up who had never known the Conqueror, who did not fear his name. We searched for him for 30 years, Seraphine said. Every corner of the galaxy, every unexplored region, nothing, had simply ceased to exist. Then, 10 years ago, they had found a clue, a radiation signature from ship detected in a remote arm of the galaxy. They had followed the trail and found something they had never expected. Earth. Your great-grandfather came to this planet 60 years ago, Seraphine explained. He hid his ship, adopted a human identity, and lived among your people. He married a human woman. He had children. He lived a quiet life in a place called Ohio, working as a farmer of all things. He died peacefully in his sleep in 1987, surrounded by the family he had built. Felt tears forming in his eyes, though he did not know why. He had never met the man. He had only seen a few photographs, heard a few stories from his grandmother before she passed away. But learning that his great-grandfather had been this legendary figure, this conqueror who had chosen a simple life on Earth, stirred something deep inside him. "Why now?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Why come for me after all this time?" Seraphine's expression darkened. The lights in the room seemed to dim in response to her mood. "Because the peace your great-grandfather built is crumbling." She told him about the dominion of a brutal empire that had risen in the outer territories of the galaxy. They were conquerors in the worst sense of the word, taking what they wanted and destroying everything else. In the past decade, they had consumed over 200 star systems, enslaving populations and stripping planets of resources. The council had tried to respond, but they were fractured and afraid. Without on the throne, the alliance was weakening. Old rivalries were resurfacing. Systems that had been united for generations were now threatening to break away. The empire was on the verge of collapse. "The people need a symbol," Seraphine said, her voice firm with conviction. "They need to know that the bloodline of still exists, that the legacy continues. They need hope." She reached across the space between them and took his hand in hers. Her grip was warm and strong. "They need you, Cole." Looked at her, then at the window where Earth was now just a small blue dot among countless stars. He thought about his thesis, his apartment, his ordinary life. All of it seemed so small now, so meaningless. "I am not a conqueror," he said quietly. "I am not a leader. I am just a student who does not even know how to pay his bills on time." Seraphine smiled, and there was warmth in her expression despite the sadness in her eyes. "Your great-grandfather was once just a simple soldier who did not know his own potential. Greatness is not something you are born with. It is something you grow into." She squeezed his hand gently. "The blood flows through you. Whatever you believe about yourself, that truth cannot be changed. The only question now is what you will do with it." Look down at their joined hands, then back up at the stars streaming past the window. He did not know what to believe anymore. He did not know who he was supposed to be. But somewhere deep inside him, in a place he had never known existed, something ancient and powerful was beginning to wake up. And it was hungry for a purpose. The journey to the core worlds took 3 weeks, for those weeks felt like both an eternity and the blink of an eye. Every day brought new revelations, new challenges, and new reasons to question everything he thought he knew about himself. Seraphine had arranged for his education to begin immediately. Tutors came to his quarters at all hours, teaching him the history of the empire, the politics of the council, the cultures of 100 different species. He learned about trade routes and military strategies, about ancient alliances and bitter rivalries. His mind, trained by years of academic study, absorbed information faster than his teachers expected. But the lessons were not only for his mind. On the 3rd day of the journey, Seraphine took him to a medical facility deep within the ship. The room was filled with machines that hummed with strange energy, and doctors with gentle hands and serious faces. "Your great-grandfather enhanced his own genetics," Seraphine explained as the doctors prepared their equipment. "He made himself faster, stronger, smarter than any normal being. These enhancements were passed down through his bloodline, dormant but present in every generation." She placed a hand on his shoulder. "It is time to wake them up." The activation process was painful. Lay on a table while energy coursed through his body, rewriting his cells, unlocking potential that had been sleeping since his birth. He screamed until his voice gave out. He felt like he was being torn apart and rebuilt from the inside. When it was over, he was different. He could see better, hear better, think faster. His muscles responded with precision he had never known. When he sparred with the ship's combat trainers, he moved with a speed and grace that surprised everyone, including himself. Memories that were not his own began to surface in his dreams, flashes of battles and victories from a life he had never lived. The blood was awake. But not everyone was happy about his return. When the fleet finally arrived at Prime, the capital world of the old empire, stood at the observation deck and stared in wonder. The planet was beautiful beyond description, covered in gleaming cities that seemed to grow organically from the landscape. Thousands of ships filled the space around it, a constant flow of traffic between the surface and the stars. And above everything else, floating in orbit like a crown, was the Imperial Palace. It was a structure of impossible size, built from white stone and golden metal, with towers that reached toward the heavens and gardens that bloomed in the vacuum of space. "Your great-grandfather built that," Seraphine said, standing beside him. "He said every citizen of the empire should be able to look up and see their palace in the sky, a reminder that they were part of something greater than themselves." Swallowed hard, the weight of his inheritance had never felt heavier. He was escorted to the Great Hall for his presentation to the Council of 12. These were the rulers of the most powerful systems, the ones who had held the empire together since disappearance. They had agreed to meet the heir, but Seraphine had warned him that not all of them were pleased. The great hall was enormous, a chamber carved from living crystal that caught the light and scattered it into 1,000 rainbows. 12 thrones were arranged in a semicircle at the far end, each one occupied by a figure of obvious power and authority. Hundreds of observers filled the galleries above, watching in silence. Walked down the central pathway, his footsteps echoing in the vast space. He was wearing formal robes that Seraphine had provided, but he still felt like a fraud, a boy playing dress-up in clothes that did not belong to him. The counselors studied him, with expressions ranging from curiosity to open hostility. One of them rose from his throne before could speak. He was massive, easily 8 feet tall, with skin the color of dried blood and eyes that burned like hot coals. His voice boomed through the chamber like thunder. "This is an insult." The words hit like a physical blow. The crowd in the galleries murmured in response. "I am Counselor of the Fortress Worlds," the red-skinned alien continued, stepping down from his throne. "My people have guarded the borders of this empire for 1,000 years. We have bled for the name. We have died for it." He stopped a few feet from, towering over him, his burning eyes filled with contempt. "And now you expect us to bow before this primitive creature, this child from a backwater world who knows nothing of war, nothing of rule, nothing of sacrifice." Seraphine stepped forward, her hand moving toward her weapon. "He carries the blood of, that is all that matters." "Blood means nothing without proof," spat. "Any fool can claim lineage. Any pretender can wear fine robes and speak pretty words. I say let him demonstrate that he is worthy of the name he carries." The hall fell silent. Every eye turned to, measuring him, judging him, waiting to see how he would respond. He should have been afraid. He should have backed down, admitted that he was not ready, asked for more time. That was what the old would have done, the unremarkable student who had spent his life avoiding attention. But something had changed in those 3 weeks of travel. The dormant power in his blood had awakened, and with it came something else: confidence, certainty, a sense of purpose that he had never known before. He stepped forward, closing the distance between himself and the towering counselor. "I did not ask for this," said, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "I did not seek your throne or your wars. I was happy in my ordinary life, studying the stars from a distance, dreaming small dreams." He paused and looked around the hall, meeting the eyes of every counselor in turn. "But I am here now. The blood flows through my veins, whether you accept it or not, and I will not be dismissed by those who have grown comfortable in their fear." His eyes narrowed. "You dare speak to me of fear, boy?" "I dare speak the truth," replied. "The dominion of is burning through your borders, and what have you done? You have sat on your thrones and argued with each other. You have let your fear divide you. You have forgotten what made this empire great." He stepped even closer too, tilting his head back to meet the giant's burning gaze. "You want proof that I am worthy? Then give me a challenge. Give me a battle. Give me anything you believe I cannot overcome, and I will show you what the blood of is worth." The silence that followed was deafening. Stared down at him, his expression unreadable. The other counselors exchanged glances, whispering to each other. Then smiled. It was not a friendly smile. It was the smile of a predator who had just spotted prey. "Very well, pretender," he said softly. "Let us see what you are made of." Did not flinch. He did not look away. He simply stood there, a student from Earth facing down giants, and waited to learn what fate had in store for him. The trial was coming, and one way or another it would change everything. The challenge was announced the next morning. Would lead a small force against a raiding party that had been terrorizing the border colonies for months. The enemy consisted of 5 warships, each one heavily armed and crewed by soldiers who had spent their entire lives training for combat. Would be given a single cruiser and a crew of 300. The odds were impossible, everyone knew it. Seraphine came to his quarters that night, her face pale with worry. "This is madness," she said, packing back and forth across the room. "Has set you up to fail. He wants you dead or disgraced. He has opposed the return of an heir from the beginning." Sat by the window, watching the lights of the imperial palace in the distance. He had spent the afternoon studying everything he could find about tactics, their weapons, their weaknesses. His enhanced mind processed information faster than before, but the task still felt overwhelming. "If I refuse the challenge, they will never respect me," he said quietly. "They will always see me as a pretender, a coward hiding behind the protection of others." If you accept and fail, you will be dead, Seraphine countered. What good is respect to a corpse? Turned to look at her. My great-grandfather faced impossible odds. He won battles that everyone said could not be won. If his blood truly flows through me, then I have to believe I can do the same. Seraphine stopped packing. Her expression softened, and she walked over to kneel beside his chair. Trained for decades before he led armies, she said gently. You have had 3 weeks. It is not the same thing. No, agreed. It is not, but it is what I have. He placed his hand over hers. I need to do this, Seraphine, not just to prove myself to the council, but to prove myself to myself. I have spent my entire life being ordinary, being invisible, being afraid to reach for anything greater. This is my chance to find out who I really am. Seraphine looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly and rose to her feet. Then I will prepare the Resolute for launch, she said, and I will pray to every god I know that you return alive. The Resolute was a sleek warship, small compared to the massive vessels of the fleet but fast and maneuverable. Its crew of 300 had been assembled from volunteers, though suspected that many of them had been ordered to volunteer. When he came aboard, he could see the doubt in their eyes. They were following a human, an outsider, a boy who had never commanded so much as a fishing boat. Did not blame them for their skepticism. He shared it. The journey to the border took 5 days. During that time, did something unexpected. Instead of hiding in his quarters and studying tactical manuals, he walked the ship. He visited every section, spoke with every crew member, learned their names and their stories. He listened more than he talked. The crew was surprised at first, then curious, then gradually warming to him. He was not what they had expected. He did not act like a lord or a conqueror. He acted like someone who genuinely cared about the people he was leading. By the time they reached the border, something had shifted. The crew still doubted that they could win the coming battle, but they had started to believe in their commander. The raiding party was waiting for them near a cluster of mining colonies. 5 ships, just as the intelligence had promised, arranged in a loose formation around the largest vessel. They were expecting easy prey. They had been terrorizing these colonies for months without opposition, and a single cruiser posed no real threat. Stood on the bridge of the Resolute, staring at the tactical display that showed the enemy positions. His heart was pounding, but his mind was strangely calm. The enhanced genetics in his blood were working, processing information, seeing patterns that his officers could not see. They are overconfident, he said, surprising everyone with the certainty in his voice. His tactical officer, a young female named Lydia with silver hair and sharp eyes, looked at him with confusion. My lord. Look at their formation, continued, pointing at the display. They have spread their ships too far apart. They are expecting us to run, so they have positioned themselves to chase, but that leaves their command ship exposed. Lydia studied the display and frowned. Even if we reach the command ship, we would be surrounded immediately. We cannot fight 5 vessels at once. We do not need to fight 5 vessels, said. We need to kill one. If we destroy their command ship quickly enough, the others will be thrown into confusion. They will not know who is giving orders. That is when we strike at the rest. The bridge crew exchanged nervous glances. The plan was risky beyond measure. One mistake, one miscalculation, and they would all be dead. That is suicide, Lydia said quietly. Turned to face her and the rest of the crew. He could see the fear in their eyes, the doubt, the certainty that they were about to die. He understood it. He felt it himself. But he also felt something else. A fire burning in his chest, a voice whispering in his blood, the echo of a conqueror who had faced impossible odds and won. No, he said, and his voice carried the weight of absolute conviction. That is victory. Follow my orders exactly, and I will bring us all home alive. He did not know if he could keep that promise, but he spoke it like truth, and somehow, impossibly, the crew believed him. The Resolute surged forward. What followed was the most intense 20 minutes of his life. He commanded the ship like it was an extension of his own body, calling out orders faster than thought, adjusting tactics in real time as the battle unfolded. The ships opened fire, and the Resolute danced between the beams, its shields flickering under the assault but holding. They reached the command ship faster than the enemy expected. The Resolute unleashed everything it had, concentrated fire striking the same point again and again until the enemy's shields collapsed. One final volley tore through the hull, and the command ship exploded in a brilliant flash of light. The remaining enemy vessels scattered in confusion, exactly as had predicted. "Now," he ordered, his voice sharp with urgency, "hunt them down before they regroup." The Resolute pursued the confused enemy ships, destroying two more before the survivors fled into hyperspace. When the battle was over, the mining colonies were safe, and 3 warships had been reduced to debris. Stood on the bridge, his hands gripping the command console, his body trembling with exhaustion. He had done it. Against all odds, against every expectation, he had won. Behind him, Lydia and the rest of the crew had risen to their feet. Their expressions had changed completely. The doubt was gone, replaced by something else entirely. They were looking at him with awe. One by one, they raised their fists to their chests in the traditional salute. The gesture spread across the bridge, then to the rest of the ship as word of the victory spread. Cole, the student from Earth, had just proved that the blood of a conqueror truly flowed through his veins, and the galaxy would never see him the same way again. News of the victory spread across the Empire like wildfire. Within hours, every world in the Alliance knew what had happened at the border. A single cruiser, commanded by the mysterious human Heir, had destroyed 3 warships and saved 3 mining colonies. The story grew with each retelling, becoming more dramatic, more legendary. They called him the Silent Storm, because he had struck without warning and vanished before the enemy could respond. They said he had commanded the battle like a master artist painting a masterpiece, every move precise, every decision perfect. They said the blood had returned to the galaxy. When the Resolute arrived back at Prime, the skis were filled with ships that had come to witness his return. Crowds gathered on every platform, every viewing deck, every rooftop that offered a glimpse of the approaching cruiser. People who had never believed in the Heir, who had dismissed him as a fraud or a pretender, now chanted his name. Stood on the bridge and watched the celebration through the viewport. He felt disconnected from it somehow, like he was watching something happening to someone else. Just a few weeks ago, he had been worried about his thesis. Now millions of beings were cheering for him. Seraphine met him as he disembarked from the ship. Her eyes were red, as if she had been crying, but she was smiling wider than he had ever seen. "You did it," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You actually did it." "We did it," corrected her. "I would be dead without my crew." Seraphine shook her head. "They would be dead without you. The crew of the Resolute is telling everyone who will listen. They say you commanded that battle like you had been doing it your entire life. They say they would follow you into the heart of a star." Did not know how to respond to that. He still felt like the same person he had always been, the unremarkable student who had never done anything important. But something had changed during that battle. He had felt his great-grandfather's legacy awakening inside him, guiding his decisions, sharpening his instincts. He was becoming something new. The great hall was even more crowded than before when he entered for his second presentation to the council. Every seat in the galleries was filled. Every doorway was packed with observers straining to see. The air hummed with anticipation. The 12 counselors waited on their thrones, their expressions carefully neutral, but could see the difference in how they looked at him now. Before, they had seen a pretender, a boy playing at being an heir. Now they saw something else. They saw a threat. Rose from his throne as approached. The red-skinned giant's expression was unreadable. his burning eyes fixed on the young human who had accomplished the impossible. "You have won your battle," said, his deep voice echoing through the chamber. "But one victory does not make an emperor. They are still out there. They still threaten our borders. They still burn our worlds." "You are right," replied, his voice calm and steady. "One victory means nothing in the face of the war that is coming. I am not asking to be crowned emperor today. I am asking for the chance to earn that title." He turned to face the entire hall, raising his voice so that everyone could hear. "I know what you see when you look at me. You see a human, a primitive from a backwater world that most of you have never heard of. You see someone who has no place among the stars, no right to stand in this hall, no claim to the legacy of." He paused, letting his words sink in. The hall was utterly silent. "And maybe you are right. Maybe I do not belong here. I did not grow up in your civilization. I did not train in your academies. I did not earn my place through decades of service like so many of you have." He took a deep breath. "But my great-grandfather did not conquer the galaxy because he belonged. He conquered it because he refused to accept that peace was impossible. He looked at a universe torn apart by endless war and hatred, and he decided to change it. Not because it was easy, not because anyone believed he could do it, but because he knew that someone had to try." Walked forward, moving past, approaching the center of the chamber where all 12 thrones could see him clearly. "The Dominion of believes that we are weak. They believe that without us on the throne, we will crumble into dust. They believe that they can take everything our ancestors built and burn it to nothing." His voice grew harder, filled with a conviction that surprised even himself. "I intend to prove them wrong, not because of my blood, not because of my name, but because every single soul in this empire deserves a future worth fighting for. Your children deserve to grow up in peace. Your worlds deserve to flourish. Your civilizations deserve to reach heights that we cannot even imagine today." He looked directly at. "I am Cole, great-grandson of. I am not asking you to believe in me because of who my ancestor was. I am asking you to believe in me because of who I am choosing to become." He spread his arms wide, addressing the entire hall one final time. "Stand with me, and I will show you what humanity is capable of. Stand against me, and I will show you anyway, because this is not about me. This is about all of us. This is about building something greater than any one person, any one world, any one species." He lowered his arms and stood in silence, waiting for the response. For a long moment, nothing happened. The hall remained frozen, thousands of beings holding their breath. Then did something that no one expected. He stepped down from his throne, walked to where stood, and dropped to one knee. His armored fist pressed against his heart in the traditional salute. "I have guarded these borders for 1,000 years," said, his deep voice surprisingly gentle. "I have seen pretenders come and go. I have watched weak leaders fail. But I have also learned to recognize strength when I see it." He looked up with something new in his burning eyes. "Respect. You have earned my allegiance. Heir of, my sword is yours." The effect was immediate. One by one, the other counselors rose from their thrones and knelt. Then the military commanders in the galleries. Then the ambassadors. Then the common citizens who had come to watch history unfold. The great hall of Prime filled with the sound of thousands, dropping to their knees before the student who had become a conqueror's heir. Seraphine walked forward through the kneeling crowd, her eyes shining with pride and tears. "What now, my lord?" she asked softly. Looked out at the sea of bowed heads, at the faces of beings who were placing their hopes and their futures in his hands. He felt the weight of it settling onto his shoulders, heavier than anything he had ever carried. But he did not buckle under it. He straightened his spine, lifted his chin, and spoke with the voice of someone who had finally discovered his purpose. "Now we prepare for war." Somewhere in the depths of space, the Dominion of continued their campaign of conquest, believing that the empire was finished. They had no idea that a new leader had risen, a young man from a small planet called Earth who carried the blood of the greatest conqueror in galactic history. They had no idea that their doom was coming. And when Cole finally turned his attention toward them, they would learn exactly what it meant to face the heir of. The galaxy would never be the same again.